Moscow re-entering fight for African continent. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has travelled to South Africa, Eswatini and Angola and will visit yet another country as part of his African tour. Washington expressed concern about Russia's presence on the African continent, especially ahead of joint maneuvers by the navies of South Africa, Russia and China, and in the wake of activity by PMC Wagner. In the West, they say Africa has become a battleground for competition between the US, China and Russia. It is hardly debatable that the scramble for Africa has intensified. Quite recently, China's top diplomat, Qin Gang, returned from the continent, and US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, who visited Zambia earlier, has met with South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. Academician Alexei Vasiliev told Nesavizimaya Gazeta that Africa was becoming one of the most important directions for Russian policy. He said Lavrov's trip paved the way for the Russia-Africa summit scheduled to take place in St. Petersburg this summer, something the US is opposed to. Anti-American and anti-European sentiments have been very strong in Africa since the colonial period. Although the local media echoes Western propaganda, a number of countries have a positive attitude towards Russia, and of course, they expect some financial assistance from Moscow, he said. As for China, the East Asian nation came out on top in trade with Africa, whose scale of trade with the continent has exceeded volumes with the US and is now approaching the size of Europe's trade with Africa. This has caused opposition. The West wants Africa to adjust to its policies, and some countries are doing so. Morocco, for example, has sent Russian tanks to Ukraine, and the others, so to speak, prefer to stay away, Vasiliev concluded. In an interview with the newspaper expert Boris Pilyatsky, recalled that thousands of Soviet doctors, teachers, aviators, and military consultants worked in Guinea, oil-rich Angola, and other African countries in the 1960s and 70s. Russia effectively left Africa following the demise of the Soviet Union, and it would be impossible to restore this previous role. This is why, he says, Lavrov's tour is mostly political in nature. Meanwhile, bringing Africa to Moscow's side is important, as African countries account for around 50 votes at the United Nations.